Welcome to MR Consultancy's briefing session for Australian pork. In recent years, the popularity of pork has continued to grow within Australia. In fact, according to Euromonitor in 2015, pork had the highest volume of growth in the meat category in 2014 at 2.6%. However, whilst there has been an increase in pork consumption from 2009 to 2014, pork is relatively a less consumed product when compared with beef, lamb and poultry. This leaves management with the challenge of finding new and innovative ways of reaching their target market effectively. This leads us to the purpose of this study, which is to analyse the store visit behaviours and frequencies of consumers in order to pinpoint the specific types of customers purchasing pork and identify the factors and attributes that come into play when a consumer purchases a meat product. In doing so, it is possible to identify trends in consumer decision-making and help management make informed decisions when trying to effectively reach their target market.
Our management decision problem was focusing on how we can increase pork consumption to a few times a week or more through analysing strategies and repositioning the product. In this analysis, we aim to explore the consumer store purchase journey and how this affects their behaviour regarding meat selection. By focusing on identifying what the driving factors of purchase are, this will allow Australian pork to address the perceptual problem and understand the type of key marketing decisions needed to increase the sales of pork. To effectively solve the management decision problem, we need to analyse which factors are most prevalent in consumers aged 18 to 24. This is why our marketing research objective was to identify store visit behaviour and frequency amongst 18 to 24-year-old males and females. The decision to focus on this age gap was based on the data given, where most respondents lied within that age. With our MRO in mind, we then produced 5 objectives to effectively guide our research. An understanding of the first objective helps management identify what preconceptions our target market hold toward different meat and what purchasing decisions they are currently making. The second objective aims to distinguish the preconceptions consumer aged 18 to 24-year-old hold between different types of meat. The results of this data will allow us to identify the main preferences when it comes to the purchase and consumption of different meat products. Examining store visit patterns from the third objective will help management identify the main stores that the target are choosing to purchase their meat from. This will help segment consumers based on frequency of visits and etc. The fourth research objective analyses the role of recipe importance and if that contributes to different cooking habits between our consumers. This way, management can denote any underlying factors that leads to choosing a particular meat over others due to recipe influences. From researching the fifth objective, management can determine which communication channels are most effective in influencing store purchases and cooking habits. This will be useful when deciding which marketing decisions to employ, whether in-store or online.
The approach adopted in this study includes conducting secondary research in the form of a questionnaire, conducting SPSS analysis, and drawing conclusions based on the data. The research design consisted of descriptive, single cross-sectional research with quantitative data. A non-probability sampling process was adopted, where the sample included respondents of different backgrounds and cultures. This aimed to reduce bias in selection and facilitated greater reliability and validity of the results through reducing the risk of inaccuracy. In executing our research, UNSW marketing students were provided with a questionnaire containing 24 preset questions, which were categorized into sections relating to meat consumption, cooking habits, meat purchasing preferences, and personal information. When sourcing respondents, there was a particular screening process which was adhered to. UNSW marketing students each had to source 2 male and 2 female respondents. At least one of the 4 respondents must be a non-UNSW student. All respondents had to be between 18 and 24 years of age, and all had to be from a non-marketing faculty. This resulted in a pooled dataset of 566 records. However, risk of error means that data must be screened. Data was analysed for problematic coding, including questions which were coded out of a specified range. Data was also checked based on screening rules to ensure that respondents fit the required criteria to participate. Data screening revealed that 16.1% of records contained problematic data, and these were eliminated from the sample. This resulted in a new sample of 475 records, which is a large enough sample to represent a snapshot of the population. Our consultants then conducted SPSS analysis. Research objectives were tested using independent t-tests, ANOVA, one-sample t-tests, descriptive statistics, and crosstabs based on categories from the questionnaire.
Our first research objective was to determine the type of consumers aged 18 to 24 years old that are currently purchasing pork. We thought this would be a good starting point to guide the rest of our research and provide a framework into further analysis. An independent test was ran to analyze consumption habits of consumers using the test variable of gender and the consumption of meat types as a grouping variable with a cutoff of 4. Our null hypothesis to test was males and females do not differ in their frequency of purchasing meat. Using these assumptions, we found the significance levels of all 4 meat types. The significance level of beef can clearly infer that it was the only meat type that fell below 0.05, and thus we reject the hypothesis. Therefore, males and females do differ in their frequency of purchasing beef, but not chicken, lamb, or pork. Perhaps Australian pork will look into its beef competitors to see what marketing strategies they employ that allows them to differentiate amongst genders and their frequency of purchasing beef. That way, Australian pork can use those results and run further tests in order to effectively execute key marketing decisions that could increase pork consumption.
The purpose of Research Objective 2 was to determine the effect of attributes on meat selection between males and females. For this objective, we constructed 2 tests. First, a descriptive test that compared which attributes were favoured most among both groups. Interestingly, through the use of frequencies, it was evident that the most important attributes were expiry date at 44.5% and taste at 64% when choosing to purchase meat. It is also important to note that an accumulative 57.7% of consumers agree that price determines their purchase decisions. Due to this, we decided to run an independent test to compare the difference between males and females for each attribute of meat selection. From this data, we can see that the expiry date when purchasing meat is significant between males and females as we reject the hypothesis at a level of 0.05. The significance of nutritional contents, taste, package size, ease of cooking, variety and price does not differ among genders as the p-value is above 0.05. This is important for marketers to note as they do not need to market these attributes towards different genders unless focusing marketing strategies on expiry dates. The aim of Research Objective 3 was to examine which stores customers prefer when purchasing meat and the motivating factors. Examining store visit patterns will help marketing managers identify consumer in-store purchasing behaviour and motivation. Descriptive statistics show that supermarkets were the most popular, followed by butchers, convenience stores and other. We then decided to run a correlation test to examine why this was occurring and what customers expect from their in-store purchasing experience.
Research Objective 4 is to determine cooking habits' effect on ranking of recipe importance. This objective seeks to understand the importance of recipe use and whether individual time spent planning and confidence in cooking impacts recipe importance and willingness to try new recipes respectively. This will allow Australian Pork to analyse the current recipes that they advertise to consumers and retarget them according to the following data. The first test seeks to analyse the importance of recipe use and its impact on the time dedication to planning each meal. I hypothesize that the importance of recipe importance is the same as the time set aside to plan out each meal to cook, where recipe importance is a dependent variable. A cross-tabulation test was carried out to analyse both variables in a frequency table. Key data included 53 respondents were neutral to recipe use and planned out meals for most of the time. Following this, 47 respondents believed recipe use was important and planned meals most of the time. As 4 options produced a score below 5, an ANOVA was carried out to further test this hypothesis. Using the same null and alternate hypothesis, the cross-tabulation, the ANOVA significance score of 0 allows the test to continue. From this point, a test of homogeneity was conducted, resulting in the significance value of 0.028. This is less than 0.05. Therefore, a Tukey test was used to test the null hypothesis. 14 of the 20 options tested in this test resulted in the significance of less than 0.05 for individuals that always plan meals. Further clarity was achieved through a means plot showing a relation between a substantial amount of time spent planning and less importance placed on recipe use. Contrastingly, individuals that never plan meals before cooking place the highest importance on recipe use. This allows us to reject the null hypothesis as the importance of recipe use differs from the time set aside to plan out each meal. The second test explores the variance between individuals' willingness to try new recipes and their confidence in cooking. An ANOVA test run on the various products gave an F value of 9.858 and a significance score of 0. The test of the homogeneity produced a score of 0.289, calling for a Tahami test to be used to test the null hypothesis. 8 of the 20 tested variables produced a significant score of less than 0.05. This means plot highlights that the openness to trying new recipes relates to a low confidence in cooking, where respondents that are highly confident cooks were not at all likely to try new recipes. Therefore, ALP can now ensure that it targets its recipes produced to influence purchasing pork behaviour are for quick and easy pork recipes that will suit cooks facing little confidence in the kitchen. It is additionally made clear that consumers placing a high importance on recipes barely plan meals before cooking. It would work in ALP's advantage if they were to partner with a company that focuses on food preparation. For example, HelloFresh, who specialise in providing consumers with the exact ingredients needed to cook and specific recipes that saves them time planning in the kitchen.
The final market research objective seeks to determine the most predominant media platforms utilised by consumers aged 18 to 24 years old. In light of this, the objective aims to ascertain the communication channels which play a role in influencing consumer purchase behaviour. As can be shown in the table, the overall data depicts that internet browsing and next social media are the most highly utilised media platforms, with 54.5% spending at least 2 hours browsing the internet daily, and a further 49.1% of consumers spending over 2 hours daily on social media. Furthermore, through conducting a one-sample t-test, we were able to gather that individuals consuming pork tend to be unsure about the places to look for recipes and cooking inspiration, with means for each variable averaging 2.8. This supports using social media and Google AdWords to target consumers, as there is currently no preferred method to find recipes. Next, an independent t-test was conducted to determine whether there was a difference in the amount of time spent on social media and internet browsing between males and females. As can be seen, firstly, for internet browsing, since the p-value is 0.301, which is greater than 0.05, we do not reject the null hypothesis. Therefore, there is no difference between males and females in the average time they spend on browsing the internet. This means that since there is no difference, marketing can target its activities similarly for both genders for internet users. For social media, on the other hand, we reject the null hypothesis that there is no difference, as the p-value is 0.025, which is less than 0.05. Since there is a difference, marketing should focus on segmenting males and females and directing its marketing activities through social media. Overall, pork companies currently face the challenge of finding new and innovative ways to effectively reach and target markets in order to increase pork consumption and subsequently increase their sales. This study has sought to demonstrate trends in store visit behaviours and frequencies of consumers aged 18 to 24 years old. Through detailed analysis of our sample, we are able to make inferences about the population of pork consumers which should increase pork consumption. Throughout the study, it was evident that some obvious limitations were present. Firstly, a limitation of the selected sample is the lack of geographic spread of respondents. A large 94% of our respondents live in New South Wales, therefore future research should analyse the impact of location on meat preferences and consumption patterns. Another limitation that exists is that the sample was non-representative due to the nature of the students conducting the surveys. We were unable to maximise the range of respondents. Respondents were all aged between 18 to 24 years old, while most were full-time students and unmarried. This insufficient sample consequently meant that it does not truly reflect the population. We were unable to represent groups such as those over 24, non-students, married couples, and other groups. Further, as can be shown on the pie graph, 26.9% of our respondents interviewed were aged 20 years old and only 7.4% were aged 18 years old. This means that it was not a true reflection and equal representation of the population. Finally, out of the data pool of 566 respondents, we only had 475 records. Therefore, the data collection quality and the percentage of data that was missing due to problematic coding was a significant limitation.